And thanks for the wonderful company that I've had up to this stage. I always look forward to coming down to West Haven because I started sailing here way back in 1947 in my Zeddy. And we used to come up here and we used to race just straight off here. And we used to look across at Northcote Point there and used to see those beautiful big pine trees, a great massive greenery. And it was such a beautiful harbour. So they stuffed it up with that iron thing that stretches from here over to Northcote Point. And that changed things a little bit. I'm a 1931 model, and if you do your calculations, you'll realise that that makes me 82 years of age this year. And like most 82-year-olds, I need my medication, and every night I have to have a stubby and a scotch, and if my wife, who is sitting down here, isn't looking, I double up on the intake, and that makes me feel a lot better. The first 10 years of my life, I lived at St Heliers Bay with my younger sister and my parents, and they were good times for us. My father was actually born in Pururi, which is halfway between Thames and Pyroar. He was born into a farming family of a couple of generations. When he had finished school, he couldn't get a job, so he went to Auckland. He worked for the New Zealand Railways and ended up as an engine driver. My mother was born to her father, who was in the gold mining industry in the Coromandels. She finished her schooling, no work there, so she also went to Auckland to get a job, and she became a dressmaker. My parents got together and I arrived, and then my young sister arrived. St Heliers Bay was, before I say that, it was often a bit of a mystery, whereas I came from parents who were very country domiciled, living a long way from the sea, very divorced from the sea. Where did I get my interest in boating? It's quite strange in a way, I suppose. At St Heliers Bay, my father had a 10-foot dinghy, and he used to do a lot of fishing. In those days you could go off to St Heliers Bay and the fish were in abundance, absolute abundance. That was my introduction to the marine world in that 10-foot dinghy. I also had a model yacht which was about that length, and I was keen on sailing that off St Heliers Bay beach. My mother was also very keen that we participated in the beautiful St Heliers Bay beach and the swimming and that sort of thing. They were very good days for us, and I look back with fond memories. I can still look back that far. When I was 10 years of age, Dad said, okay, he's had enough of the Auckland city. He said, and he decided to go farming. Well, we went farming. I was 10 years of age. That was in 1941. We ended up in the Hauraki Plains, on a farm in the Hauraki Plains at Ngātea. And can you imagine it? Going from the beautiful Hauraki Gulf, the Waitemata Harbour, the beautiful pristine beaches and the beautiful clear waters, to the mud and slush of the Hauraki Plains, the weed-filled drains, the loose metal roads, the filthy Piako River, and stuff like that. It took a little bit of getting used to, I can tell you, but we did it. And my interest in boats was still very, very strong. So my first venture into boat building was the tin canoe. I found a rusty old sheet of iron, tacked it up at each end to make some sort of a bow, and we navigated the big drains in the Hauraki Plains. And those drains, they weren't small. They were 2 or 3 metres across at the top and 2 or 3 metres deep. And in the winter time, with all that flood water that used to come down, there were 2 or 3 metres of water in them as well. So I learnt how to navigate those drains, and one day my mate and I thought, well, we can do a little bit better than this. So we navigated. Our farm was about a mile from the Piako River. And so we navigated down the drain, got it over the stop bank, put it into the river, and did our thing amongst the rushes and the bulrushes and the mud and the slush and the 5-knot currents. I'm still here today, so there's a lot of luck attached to that lot. My parents found out about that, and I never had another chance to sailed my little boat on the river. My interest in boats was very, very strong. Where it came from, who knows, but it was there. And at Ngatea Primary School and Ngatea District High School, they were on the same piece of land, and in Standard 5 and Standard 6, we used to have a woodwork teacher who used to come over to our manual training centre at the school and teach us woodwork. So I did 5th form, Standard 5, Standard 6, and when I was in my first year at high school, my woodwork teacher, Percy Bilcock, recognised my interest in boats and boat building and that sort of thing, and he actually let me build a 15-foot kayak in the woodwork shop, something which was quite spectacular compared to what you would be allowed to do today. And I finished that off with his help, of course. We took it back home. Mum, being a dressmaker, managed to put the canvas around it because it was a stringed kayak, and with her help and assistance, I launched the boat. I learnt that 15-foot kayak, and we navigated the Piaka River. And those of you who are too, where are we? Who aren't too sure about what the Piaka River looks like. It's dirty, it's dirty, it's fast flowing, wind against tide, it's very, very rough. And from our place at the bottom of Hope Eye Road was about 3 to 4 miles to Ngatea. And many was the time I used to go sail up with the tide because it was very tidal, and show off my wares up at the Ngatea village and come back again. They were good days, and I learnt a lot from that. In my second year at high school, my parents and my woodwork teacher suggested that I advance my boating and boat building and build a P class. And that P class, I was allowed to do the frames at the high school, but I wasn't allowed to set it up. And I built the P class on the left-hand side of our cowshed. And that's how that happened. That P class was launched towards the end of my second year at high school, and I suppose it was the first recreational yacht that has applied along the Piaka River ever, I suppose. I know the cows used to run along the stop bank, and when I used to sail up there, they'd put their tails up in the air, crap all over the place, and run up and down the stop bank. It's a marvellous thing going up the river, you know. My dad recognised my interest, my very strong interest in the marine world, but he said to me, he said, "You've got to be a farmer," he said, "There's a lot more future in the farming." And we had these discussions, and I said, "Well, there's no way." I said, "I've just got to do what I have to do." So one day, this was, I just turned 15 years of age, and one day he said, "Next week," he said, "we're going to Auckland." He said, "I'm going to take you up to Auckland, and we're going to see if we can get you a boat building apprenticeship." I said, "Wacko, that'll suit me." Okay, that following week, we milked the cows early. We had the usual farmer's breakfast, which was always huge and abundant. We hopped in the 1936 Murray 8. We roared up to Auckland. We did at least 40 mile an hour up towards it in those days, which was pretty good. Loose metal road, part of it was loose metal, part of it tar seals and whatever. The Pocono deviation, you all know what that's like. We got to the top of it, and we had our usual relief in the bushes alongside, which was normal in those days, and lifted the bonnet of the Murray 8 and let all the steam depart from the engine, topped up the radiator with water, which was normal, because in those days we hit the bottom of the deviation in third gear. You'd chop down to second, you'd chop down to first, and maybe get up to second. Take about 20 minutes to get to the top of the deviation. And I mentioned double declutching. How many of you here know what a double declutching is? Oh, you are showing your age, aren't you? Anyway, that was fine. We roared into Auckland, and we ended up in Finchels, in Beaumont Street, over here. And in those days, Beaumont Street was a hub of the boat building industry. At the southern end of Beaumont Street was Shipbuilders Limited. At the northern end was Percy Voss. And in between there were about 12 boat building yards. And all of those yards had slipways running into the West Haven Boat Harbour here. In those days, the breakwaters were built along here, and there were no marinas, of course, and there might have been 50 boats in here on swing moorings, and that's what it was like. Fishing boats used to be anchored over there and all that sort of thing. So Dad stopped outside Shipbuilders Limited, and he said, "Good luck, boy." He said, "I'll see you at Percy Boss End in about 3 hours' time." And off he sped. And I was a 15-year-old kid. I'd only just turned 15, and that's how it was in those days, you know. When you were going to start work, you were treated as somebody who had been around for 20 or 30 years. But anyway, I visited all those boatyards. Dad picked me up at near the Percy Voss yard early in the afternoon, and we sped off back towards our farm at Nartia. I remember getting to the top of the deviation and I was looking out across the Waikato there, and I was thoroughly pissed off because I thought, well, couldn't get a job. It looks as though I'm going to be a farmer for the rest of my life, pulling tits. And so that was it. And I really thought, okay, that's it. I had no show of being employed as a boat builder with all the yards. I visited every yard in Beaumont Street. Got back home, and towards the end, I launched my P class, which I've been building that year, and I sailed it up and down the river, and very disappointed with the outcome of my visit to Auckland. There was no, I thought that was it, you know, and Christmas holidays came along, and I enrolled for my third year at Nartia District High School, which was in fact the first year of school certificate. And I enrolled there, and I thought, okay, I'll do another year at high school. I'll do my 5th form year at high school, and then decide what I'm going to do. January or February, we used to get the Herald down there, and there was an advertisement. There was an advertisement in the Herald. It said boat building apprenticeships offered by the Devonport Naval Dockyard, among a lot of other apprenticeships as well. And I thought, yeah, okay. So I applied, and I applied for it, and sat back and just waited the results. Now at this stage, I was just looking at a photograph which Bev showed up there, which I must tell you about. That's the old when I was at high school. I did have other interests besides boats and milking cows and that sort of thing. I was a keen rugby player, and that photograph there is a photograph of our first 15 team, and it would have been a rep team, the Hauraki Plains, and I was proud of my rugby exploits and whatever, and now I enjoyed it. One day I said to my coach, who was also our teacher, I said, you know, how can I further my rugby? You know, I could be a Hauraki Plains rep, adult rep, maybe All Blacks, you know. I was really enthusiastic. First to kick the football around in the paddocks and that sort of thing. My coach looked at me and he said, you're too bloody short and you haven't got sex appeal. So just forget about being a rugby All Black, because you'll never make it. I just had to include that because that's how they treated me in those days, you know. Well, that's me, middle row on the left-hand side. I've changed a bit, I know. You don't have to tell me. And okay, so I went to the dockyard, getting back to that. I went to the dockyard and I got an interview with the application for a boat building apprenticeship. I did get an interview. Dad took me up in the old Murray 8 again. Had an interview, and I sat back, and I didn't think I had a show in hell actually of getting an apprenticeship. On the 14th of March 1947, I had my first day as an apprentice at the Naval Dockyard at Devonport, and I was so delighted. It was just wonderful for me. And I had good board at Oreki, and I was on my way, 5-year apprenticeship. That photograph you see there is the boat building, the boat shop, which was pulled down about 2 years ago, I think, over here, Stanley Bay. And that is the main slipway you see leading up in there. There was another slipway to the left of it, And there's a little keel yacht sitting on there, which was a war reparation thing from Germany after the war that came out, and it was actually given to the Navy. On that slipway, that would slip fair miles, boats of that size, and in that workshop we could get 4 fair miles, all under cover, and they were worked on all under cover with the best of machinery and best of facilities and whatever. At the far end of that workshop was a set of woodworking machinery of the highest quality, and above that on the first floor was the new boat building workshops, and in that boat building workshops was also equipped with the best woodworking machinery imaginable. We used to build whalers, 27-foot whalers, 32-foot cutters, 14-footers, clinker boats, and plywood was just starting to be used as well. And that was really the training situation that I had for 5 years. That workshop was built middle of the war, about 1942, to service the Navy boats which were combating the Japanese invasion at that time, which was threatening Australia and New Zealand. It was a brilliant place to serve an apprenticeship, and also the tradesmen we had there and staff. They were all recruited from industry just before the war, and they were top quality, and I think we learned a trade very well. The apprenticeships, there were about 10 apprentices at the dockyard when I started my time, and every year there was 1 or 2. When I started, I was the only one taken on, but there were generally a couple taken on. About 10 apprentices, and all the apprentices that were there were pretty enthusiastic. They were enthusiastic boating people, and that's why they got the jobs in those days. It wasn't to get a trade because a trade was a thing to do. It would carry you on through life and that sort of thing, which was an attitude, very much an attitude. But to get a boat building apprenticeship was fairly special, and the people had to be very interested in boating to acquire a boat building apprenticeship. You had to display that your interest was very, very strong. And unfortunately, I had that background with what I'd done on the farm, building my little boats and whatever. My apprenticeship days were pretty typical of a lot of the other apprentices. Weekends, okay, or holidays. Summertime was yachting, full-on yachting. Sometimes cruising, but mainly yacht racing. And that would happen right through. The winter times were built in building our boats, maintaining our boats and whatever. And the enthusiasm was very, very strong. I built the first year I was an apprentice, I built a Zeddy, and that's Z49 there. The second year of my apprenticeship, I started a 22-foot keel yacht. And the third year I built a 12-foot National 12. Can we just go back to back one again? Just that photograph there. That's my Zeddy. That photograph was taken from about where the Ponsonby Cruising Club is now, the main entrance. And that photograph was taken looking down at us. We'd just finished a race, or we're just starting a race, I don't remember. Just behind us was a beach, a beautiful sandy beach. And that ran right along from Ponsonby Cruising Club right into where the old bars used to be. And that's how it was in those days. We used to pull the boats up, put them on the soft sand, and that was. The next photograph, I took a photograph there last year from what I thought was exactly the same position. And that's what it looks like now. And my Zeddy would have been where the watchman, the bow of the watchman is now. My Zeddy would have been about there. So those are the changes that I've seen since I started my apprenticeship. That was a 12-foot National 12 that I built. And I thought I was going to start a new class. That would have been the start of the pennant class. I was about a year or two before the pennant class became established. you people would remember the pennon class. Idle-longs, 14 X's, all that sort of thing. And the pennon class was an open 12-foot class. That would have been, had I raced, I did race, but it was a mixed race thing, and I didn't get the enjoyment out of racing like that. I liked the class racing. And so that boat, I managed to get it onto the front cover of Sea Spray because it was new, it was different, and we sailed it around. That photograph was taken straight up here, actually. We're probably just underneath where the bridge is now. 1951. And so I realised that I wasn't going to get the yachting out of that I wanted. I'd had 2 years in the Zeddies. I built that, and I took that down to the farm, and my dad and my sister sailed it at Thames Yacht Club, and then my sister and her girlfriend sailed it for about 3 years at the Thames Yacht Club, and they had a lot of fun out of it. That keel yacht is built on the farm. That was one of my wintertime projects. That's me on the left, that's my dad in the middle, and on the right is my forward hand, Peter Reid, who was a very good forward hand, and who was my forward hand on the Zeddies when we raced up here. And I was working on that for about 2 or 3 years, wintertime projects. And in my 4th year, I sold it. I didn't have the funds to finish it, and I had other ideas at that stage. So it was sold, and it was sold to a chap in Auckland. He took the boat, he took the hull and decks. I did hull and decks only, hull and decks. And he took it to Taupo, and he finished it off down there, put an engine in it, and he motored around Taupo. It had never sailed, and last year it came up on Trade Me. The boat I'd built in 1948-49 came up on Trade Me and is now stationed at Mangawai. And the chap bought it for, I don't know what he paid for it, very little, because it cost a lot to transport it up there. And I've been in touch with him, and I said, what's it like? He said, it's sound. The hull is sound, and it's good, and there's a lot of remedial work to do on it, of course, and the decks had gone a bit rotten, but the hull itself was perfect, so it made me feel quite good about it. So that was a that was a Cheryl, a Burt Willicott design, 22 feet, and they were very popular boats at that time. What do we got next there, Bev? Oh, girlfriends. Well, I better just carry on with my. Okay, those are my boat building exploits, and my sailing exploits. A Zeddy, full on racing a Zeddy, 2 years. Then I fiddled around with a little 12-footer, but didn't do much racing. But during that year, I sailed on idler-longs and 14-footers. It would have been about the 3rd year, I was full on racing mullet boats. That was racing them. Var-Marie was the boat I raced on, and with Noel Mitchell and his team, and I had a lot of fun, learned a lot of things. Wasn't all yachting, and my 5th year as an apprentice, I raced on a racing 18. It was a skimmer and a flying squadron 18, and I was the main sheet hand on that. So that was those were my sort of my basic boating and yachting exploits during my apprenticeship. And girlfriends, okay. Didn't have much luck with girlfriends. We were pretty busy anyway, and I sort of tried to analyse this one time. I said, okay, apprentices. They didn't have any money anyway to spend on girls. Didn't have a motor car. I couldn't dance at all. I was hopeless on the dance floor. So there were 3 things against me. And I did latch onto a nice lass one time. And she came back and she said, well, my dad said, he said, you know, there's no future in boat builders. She said, there's no yachties. Yeah, it's a strange sort of a sport. And that you have also sailed on mullet boats. And he said, my dad says, all they do is swear and drink, and there's no future in getting tied up with anybody like that. So that was the limit of my girlfriend experience when I was an apprentice. What? That's right. So there we go. Well, I did have 1 or 2 other little. The father said that, yes. Well, I don't want to talk about that. Yes, yes. We did have other interests. It wasn't all boating, and all of us at the dockyard. One day, we thought Christmas holidays, we had a couple of old Air Force rubber dinghies. They were Navy or Air Force, I don't remember what they were now. And there's four of us. I'm on the stern there, steering it, because at that stage I was the oldest apprentice, so I had the tiller. And that was going down the Rangitaki River, which runs out past Teko. And in those days, it would have been 1950 probably when we did that. And there was 8 of us, there were 2 rubber dinghies, and we'd let one rubber dinghy go through while the other photographed, and then we'd let the others come through and so on. No, stupid. It was I don't know if any of you know that river, but when we went down it, there was a 50-foot waterfall that we didn't know was there. We didn't know. We weren't aware of the river. We were on the wrong river. We didn't know. Somebody said we'd go down to Mirapara or somewhere. And we were about 4 days doing that trip, and it was highly experienced. And I had a camera with me, and I took photographs, and took about 20 photographs. There should be a photograph there. Oh, no, just that one, okay. And those photographs went in the weekly news, which some of you will remember the weekly news, what we used to have. It was front page, and there was a whole centre page of all the photographs I took. And I remember I got £18, which was about 4 times my normal salary for selling the photographs. And they went to America as well. It was quite a spectacular trip, actually, but since then I think there's been dams put in the river and all that sort of thing. But we were lucky. We were probably lucky to survive. The other thing I did a little bit about was skiing. And in my 5th year, that's why I sold the boat, I think. I thought, I've got to get a motor car, I've got to learn how to dance, I've got to pick up these girls somehow. And so I bought a Ford 8. That's my 1938 Ford 8. And that was taken at Ruapehu. And we didn't have much money, but the way we used to do it, we'd finish work on a Friday night over there, hop in the car, 3 of us, generally 3 of us, and go down. And our accommodation was the National Park railway station. Because in those days, the railway station always had a big, huge fire going all night long, all day long in the winter time, and there were nice seats all around, nobody else there except us. And that was our accommodation, you know. We just stop there, go up the mountain the next day, come back, sleep in the railway station, up the mountain the next day, and then go home. And that's how it was, and nobody worried us. Yeah, something like that, yeah. So that's what life was like in those days, you know. You couldn't do it today, but that was it. I came out of my apprenticeship, and I felt, I enjoyed my apprenticeship. I felt as though I'd learned a lot. Hopefully I'd grown up, and made a lot of good mates, very good mates, and involved with yachting and everything, and I really achieved what I wanted to do by the time I was 20, 21. The day I came out of my apprenticeship, I resigned. I wanted to do other things, and then my mind was just have a look around and see what else was going on in the world. Because my life had been pretty restricted. It had been pretty confined to the boats and the sea. And my first job was on the Piaka River, down near home. I went home for about 2 or 3 months and lived at home and worked on this bridge building in the Piaka River at Piparoa. And it was working in the mud and the slush and pouring concrete piles in the mud and the slush, wheeling barrowfuls of concrete and all that sort of thing, which is quite different to caulking a hull or fitting a plank or that sort of thing. But it was an experience for me because I could see what the other side of it, you know, what was happening in the rest of the world. I left there, I was there about 8 weeks, I think, and then I drove to Wellington and I worked on a construction site there, big concrete construction site, 2 or 3 stories. I learned how to put shutters up and that sort of thing, and learned a bit about building. I sold my vehicle there because I thought I'll go to the South Island, and that was a big sea trip in those days. Caught the ferry to Christchurch, couldn't get a job. Caught the train to Dunedin, couldn't get a job. And ended up in the Roxburgh Hydro, on the dam, the Roxburgh Hydro. And I was there about 8 weeks. Middle of winter, imagine it. And you see the sun about an hour a day when it went past the two cliff tops up the top. And we were working the spillway channel there, and we had the works camp, and it was that sort of a job. 7 days a week, 24 hours a day work. Well, there were 3 ships a day, and that sort of thing. A good experience. It was very cosmopolitan. Half the staff there were speaking a different language. It was the big immigration. Well, people used to come in and do that sort of work, and they pulled them in from Europe and all those areas at that time. It was interesting. And they used to put the toilets out over the river, because remember, the river's flowing fast, middle of winter, hardly any sun, freezing cold. The toilets were put out over the river. And they were just, there were about 8 or 10 toilets in a row, and they had holes cut in this great big timber thing. You sat on it, and you know the old story in the old days, you go in the toilet, what do? You have a smoke, you read the paper, you do a few things like that. Well, they put those toilets over the river, so you didn't stop in there more than you had to get out of that place. Oh, yeah. And that was Roxburgh, Idaho, and that was an experience. From there I went to Queenstown. I thought I'd do a bit of skiing. And I got a job in an Icards hotel. Some of you would know Icards Hotel down by the river, maybe. And it was a nice old hotel with winding staircases. And I got a job as a night barman there, and a wine waiter. And I think if I hadn't, have resigned after that job, I think I would have been sacked anyway. Anyhow, from there I thought, no, it was about September, October, and I decided I thought, well, I've seen a bit of New Zealand now. I think I better have a look at Australia.